Welcome to Parents Lounge. I'm Jo Hardy, Head of Parent Services.
And I'm Emma Saddleton, Helpline Manager.
Thank you. Today we're talking about teenagers, responding to teenagers, living with teenagers, some of the problems and issues for teenagers. So Emma, what are the key things? What is going on in the teenage brain? What are some of the main issues?
Well, what's really interesting about the adolescent brain is we have two parts. One is the limbic system and one is called the frontal cortex. Now, the limbic system tends to develop and mature more quickly than the frontal cortex. And interestingly, it's the limbic system which is responsible for emotional reactions, so impulses and reactions. What we know of teenagers is that they can often be quite explosive in their behaviour, or it can feel that way for a parent, but it's quite interesting to reflect and know that actually that is what we would expect from brain and development.
Excellent. And we hear a lot about on the helpline about teenagers. What are some of the top things people contact us about?
Well, with teenagers, it's often about behaviour, aggression, anger, impact on the family, but we also hear about some of the turmoil and the pressures that young people face. So often that can be online pressures, social media, relationships, sexual relationships, peer relationships, pressures at home and pressures at school.
And how do some of these problematic behaviours impact on kind of normal family life?
I think the impact can be absolutely enormous. You know, certainly on the helpline, we hear from 14,000 parents every single year on the helpline, and the impact is felt by families, by wider family, by siblings. But what we often do is help families to look at what's underlying that behaviour, because even if I'm a teenager and I'm really acting out, I'm actually displaying behaviour which is problematic and harmful for myself as much as it is for my parents and my family.
And what are some of those underlying issues?
Underlying issues can be anything, as we've talked about some of the pressures that young people face, but if there's divorce and separation at home, bereavement, if there's academic pressures, if there's learning difficulties, disabilities, absolutely anything, but actually just adolescence in itself is really problematic. You know, you're going through puberty, so you've got a huge amount that's going on in terms of hormonal changes. We recognise that with teenagers that they actually require more sleep. So the sleep-wake cycle differs for adolescents than it does for adults, and it means that they really require more sleep. But also teenagers develop physiologically quicker than they do psychologically, and that can have some quite serious repercussions. If I'm a parent of a 15-year-old, I may look at them and say, I'm quite concerned because they're quite well developed, they've progressed through a lot of puberty already, and actually a stranger would look at them and make the assumption that they're 18, not 15. And what assumptions and judgments may they make about my child's ability, intellect, about their body, and how sexually active they might be or want to be. So there's all sorts of things that as a parent you've got to be aware of.
And we talk a lot about boundaries and kind of that journey towards independence. How can that kind of impact?
I think that's a really key one, because teenagers and adolescents understandably want to really be autonomous, want to be independent, and often want and feel that they should be able to make decisions on their own behalf. And what we know from a parent perspective is this is fraught with worry and anxiety and difficulty. And it is a transitional process. It's not a black and white stage. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think one of the big things is about knowing when to pick your battles and when to pick your fights. Sometimes it's about saying, I'm not going to get into fight about every single thing that my teenager is talking to me about and wants that I can't give them, but I'm going to pick the key things that worry me the most. So for example, you know, in our longer session we had Steve, a former psychiatrist, giving a lovely example. If your teenager wants to stay out overnight for the first time, that's going to be a big potential safety issue that you will negotiate with them. But if they're talking about, you know, makeup use, for example, you may say, that's not the battle that I'm going to pick. So it's just about knowing how to negotiate that. But timing is everything. You know, just knowing when is the right time and when is the right place to have those difficult conversations is really important.
I think it's keeping those channels of communication open are really critical, and actually being clear with young people about what we expect of them. I think sometimes as parents we get drawn into fights, but actually we haven't been clear with them about what our expectations are around them. Do you want to just then recap on our top tips, just to
Absolutely.
go through those again?
So for any parent who's watching this, just really struggling on communication, everyday life with an adolescent or teenager, I have 5 really basic top tips for you. First is just choose your time and place, but listen and avoid judgment. Secondly, really think about your boundaries. You want them to be clear and you want them to be consistent. Try not to mirror any behaviour and try not to take it personally. As challenging as that is, I want you to really take a step back. And our 4th step is just about acknowledging that actually this issue about independence, autonomy, decision making, just remember that it's a long process, that you don't always have to get it right. And finally, humility is really important. As a parent, you are going to get it wrong. You are going to make lots of mistakes along the road. But having the ability to look at your adolescent in the eye and say, actually, I did get that wrong and I'm really sorry, can make the world of difference. Because what that does is it allows your child to feel empathy towards you, and that really helps with the boundary and with the attachment between parent and child.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you for watching Parents Lounge. Please join us again. Thank you.